dark debs.
Wow, it's unusual for us.
It's quite nice that you're surrounded by lilies.
It is nice actually, yeah.
Fragrant?
Not so much fragrant.
You're not smelling that?
Oh, I can that one.
Oh, just put your nose in. Hang on a month.
These ones are not. No. Can't smell those particularly.
I've got a viewer, but not yet. Okay, we're starting to get a few viewers. You like my labels, Deb?
I do. They're very artistic.
Perfect. Right, we've got a few viewers. Might as well get cracking.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on today's live stream. We're focusing on all about lilies today, so it's more of an educational question time really, for want of a better word. So if you've got questions about lilies, please do ask them and we'll try our absolute best to answer your questions. We kind of thought, as we're leading up to Easter, what would be more appropriate than to include a tutorial educational video on lilies. So we're focusing on all the different varieties of lilies that we could get available for this week. So starting off basically with the Luncheon Florrum, which I suppose you would recognise mostly as an Easter lily. The Luncheon Florrum, which is this one here, is notoriously difficult to get to open up in time for your event. I have known them to take potentially 2 weeks to start to develop. Now they come either single or multi-headed. These ones have actually got 3 heads per stem, and more often than not all of the buds will come out. As you can appreciate, the open blooms, once they've bloomed first, they need to have the faded blooms removed to encourage the other buds to open. They do have a beautiful fragrance, probably the most white variety that you can get, I would say. This particular variety is called White Heaven, and as I say, they are probably more associated with the Easter lily than any other variety. So this one's the Luncheon Florrum White Heaven. I'm just going to pop that one back. Now, before I actually pop that back, I will just mention one of the nice things about the Luncheon Florrum is that, just pop that back in there so it doesn't dry out, is all of the pollen is actually encased within the flower. So if you're brushing against it, you're not going to get that horrendous pollen stain on your clothing. So that's one really nice thing about them. And as I say, the fragrance is quite remarkable. It's not as strong as the fragrance that you get with the Oriental lilies. So for some people it's a little bit more acceptable. Some of the Oriental lilies can be so overpowering, people do find them a bit, how would you describe, a bit off-putting. They can be quite strong. Yeah. Whereas in my opinion, the Luncheon Florrum has a really delicate fragrance.
It's not overwhelming, it's not too overpowering, is
absolutely,
it? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the Luncheon Florrum.
So just before we move on, we're going to do a few shout outs. We've got some lovely ladies joined us today. We've got Sally, she's from Nottingham. We've got Kelly from Gloucestershire. Jennifer Waves and Julia says hello ladies, and we've also got Charlie from Felixstowe.
Oh, hi Charlie, so not far away. You don't have to tell us what the weather's like today, we know. Oh, well, thanks ladies for joining us. As I say, do feel able to ask questions. Just pose your questions below. Laura will convey them to me and we'll try and answer them as best we can. So going back to the Luncheon Florrum, I would potentially say a couple of weeks for them to fully develop. So just bear that in mind in your timetable when you're ordering your flowers. Okay. Next, we've got the Oriental. Now these are probably one of the most favoured lilies. Very, very strongly fragranced. Now this particular variety that I've got here, this white one here is called Helvetia or Helvetia. Now it's one of the slightly smaller white Oriental lilies. And as you can see, the size of the bud does actually have an impact on the size of the head. For example, this pink Oriental that I've got here, which is called Fenice, you can see how big the bud was compared to the Helvetia or Helvetia, and you can then see how big the finished bloom or the overall developed bloom is going to be. So once that's fully open, you can see it's quite a substantial bloom that you get there. Very, as I say, very, very strongly fragranced. Now we did actually buy in for our educational video today a beautiful lily called Sorbonne, which is this one. Now, so you can see even us that have had years and years of experience can't quite get it right 100% of the time and get them open when you want them to be open. I have gone home of a weekend when we've got a wedding on and trying to get lilies out, and my house has actually been like a sauna trying to persuade them to open up. So
we got these in on Saturday.
So they are
an indication.
Already a week they've been conditioned trying to get them open. So, and ironically, the Luncheon Florrum came in at the same time, and normally it's notoriously the Longi that are difficult to open. This time these ones have been particularly stubborn. As I say, this particular variety is Sorbonne, and as I was going to say, the bud size on that, as you can appreciate, compared to the Helvetia, is going to give you a much, much larger bloom. Now, this bud that has virtually developed, I'm just going to gently, there are ways that you can persuade them to open a little bit more quickly than they should do. You gently tease the petals away. You can see that's just going to encourage that to open up that wee bit more quickly. It's not really cruel.
A little bit.
A little bit cruel.
So
and then I'm just gently,
like a general basis, how long would you suggest for the Orientals? So when would you get them in and then use for the event?
so if it was a Saturday event that you're wanting to prepare for, going on what's happened with these ones, I would suggest getting them the week previous, so probably the Thursday or Friday previous, so you've got an entire week to get them open before you work with them.
Yeah, and then are you placing them into, say, different environments to help with the development?
Absolutely. So I personally would condition them and put them into a warmer domestic environment, very well lit, so that they open up quite quickly. If they are opening up very quickly and you want to kind of hold them back a bit, put them into a darker, colder environment, and that will almost keep them in suspended animation, almost. It's very difficult to force something open. It's much easier to hold something back. So if you get them to the stage that you want them and then stop them almost, that's the best scenario. There's no way you're going to get these, for example, open for an event tomorrow. Not now, so.
Is there ways, I know you're kind of forcing them open slightly, but is there ways
Gently.
in the sense that you could use, say, lukewarm water or boiling water to kind of bring them open?
Definitely don't use boiling water, not on lilies. That will actually in effect cook them, cook the stems. So
You
don't want to be doing that. I know we've spoken about using boiling water before when we've tried to persuade stubborn roses to force the air blocks through the head so that they stand up. Now don't do that with this. This is a completely different type of stem. The rose stems are quite woody, so they'll accept the boiling water. These won't. It will literally just cook them. So I would use, I'd suggest sort of blood temperature water, so lukewarm water, but it's more about the ambient temperature that's important with these. It needs to be in a nice warm environment with lots of air circulating around them. So put them in a vase where they're quite nicely separated.
Almost like, I know a lot of people don't have these buckets, but almost like these buckets, so you're allowing a bit of support for the lilies?
Absolutely, support's good as well, but it's the most important thing is to get the air circulating around them and making sure that they're not tightly packed so that they're constricting the other blooms from opening.
Yeah.
That's the best thing to do. Then what I was also going to touch on was the pollen. Now, this bud has literally just started to open. So the pollen is still not formed, so it hasn't got the sort of fluffy texture to it, so it's not going to stain at this point. So if I just remove those, now the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to grab hold of all of the little pollen stems and then just pull them out.
Yeah, and they literally don't stay in your hands.
And
they
haven't formed the fluffy bits.
Okay.
So as you can see, my hands are still nice and, well, as clean as they can be for a florist. So that's easily removed those. If you wait until they start to develop I'll just use this one just as an example, start to develop the fluffiness, as you can see, this is what's going to happen.
And that does stain.
It really does stain. Now the best way to get rid of it is to actually use, if you get it on your clothing, whatever you do, don't rub it in. Get hold of some sellotape or some strong kind of tape, I don't know, tank tape or something like that. And actually, if you've got the pollen on your clothes, use the tape to actually remove the pollen. Because what happens, if you look at pollen under a microscope, it looks like a little ball with lots of little hooks on it.
Yeah.
Almost like a bomb really, but with lots of little hooks, and it's those hooks that grab onto your clothing, and that holds on for dear life really. So trying to brush that is just going to push it into the fabric, and it's going to stain more. So yeah, just use your sellotape to get it off and you should be okay. I have to confess, in my career I have ruined several shirts due to pollen.
I can imagine actually.
Quite lucky now, don't have to worry too much.
And just thinking whilst conditioning, before we just go off the topic, are you removing quite a lot of the stems? Because I think one of them I've placed as all the stems. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's the sorghum one.
Sorghum, yeah, okay.
One of them I kept all the stem leaves.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. Are you removing the majority? Sorry, I didn't pick them up.
Yeah, so
because they come all the way down.
Yeah, so this is how they arrive. Fully, I was going to say fully leafed up, but that's not the technical word. Complete with all foliage. There you go, that sounds better. So yeah, literally just remove any of the leaves that are going to be below the water line. Cut the stem at a nice sharp angle and pop it into your lukewarm water. If you leave the leaves the whole way down, the leaves are going to start to decompose and deteriorate much more quickly than the stem. So these leaves are what are going to send your water really green and mucky and nasty. So yeah, just make sure you remove all those. It does also help to use flower food with lilies. Sorry, you probably can't see me. It does help to use flower food with lilies. So yeah, pop your little sachet of flower food into the water as well, and that just promotes development.
So would you say keep that amount of foliage on the leaves?
Yes, I would. Only simply because, well, it does very much depend on what you're going to do with the lily. But if you're making, say, a pedestal arrangement or something like that, any of the foliage that's left on just helps to fill the arrangement in. So you haven't then got to go behind and add loads of greenery afterwards. So it just helps to bulk
fill
it
in
out.
the gaps. But if you were kind of wanting them to open quicker, would you remove some of them, or would that not matter?
It's not going to make a huge difference, to be honest with you. No, it's not necessary to move them all.
Okay. Sorry, I'm filling you with questions today.
No, that's good. No, that's brilliant. It's easier for me to answer questions than keep rabbiting. So yeah, so that's our Oriental lily. As I say, probably one of the most popular lilies because of the fragrance and because of its opulence. It's such a rich, striking flower. It really gives you the wow factor in an arrangement. So yeah, that's it's got such big volume. It's quite classy, quite stylish. So yeah, it's very, very popular in wedding work. And to be fair, funeral work as well. A coffin spray full of white Oriental lilies can be so perfect, you know.
And they're long lasting, aren't they?
They are quite long lasting, yeah. I mean, I have had Oriental lilies last in a vase at home for 3 weeks. Just making sure that you remove the faded blooms as they die off. Just, as I say, promotes the buds to come out.
Perfect.
So that's our Orientals. Just going to pop those back in.
So the only negatives being they're quite toxic to animals, aren't they?
The pollen is.
The pollen.
Yeah, the pollen is. So if you do have animals roaming around your house,
Maybe like
domestic ones, I don't imagine a whole herd of wildebeest coming through your sitting room, but you know what I mean. If you have got domestic animals in the house, then I would strongly advise that you, like I did before they start to get fluffy, just remove them because you don't want cats licking the pollen.
Definitely.
Or getting it on their fur and then licking it. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay, so next I would normally go after the Oriental lilies. I would then go on to Asiatic and LAs. We don't actually have any Asiatic lilies with us today. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any. people kind of associate Asiatic lilies with being the sort of lower end of the lily spectrum, in the respect that they're normally a slightly smaller head, they don't have fragrance, and customers often refer to Asiatic lilies in a generic way as calling them tiger lilies. Well, theoretically they're not tiger lilies, but that's how a lot of customers refer to them as. So they're a much smaller star-shaped lily without fragrance. Now what's happened is the growers in their wisdom have actually combined the Asiatic and the Longiflorum to give a much longer lasting, slightly more impressive bloom, which we now call an LA. So it's an Asiatic Longiflorum cross, or rather Longiflorum Asiatic LA cross. So that's what we have here. So if I just remove this one. Now this yellow variety is called Honesty. Rondan. Sorry, Rondan. The orange one is Honesty. Rodan. So Rodan, as you can see, the shape of the lily itself is much more in the shape of the Longiflorum, if I show you what I mean. So I don't know if you can see that. So you've got that tall, lovely long bloom, which is very reminiscent of the Longiflorum bloom. Mm-hmm. The Asiatic lily itself is a much flatter lily. So more like that in its formation, but not so crinkly around the edges. It's a much
more of
straight.
a curve. It's more of a smooth.
Yeah, a slight out curve.
Yeah.
So this is your LA. Now, theoretically, they should have brought over with them the smell of the Longiflorum, but to be fair, it's quite hard to tell a fragrance.
Is it just a slight fragrance?
Very, very slight, very slight. You certainly wouldn't buy these for their fragrance, like you would perhaps for the Longiflorum or the Asiatic, or the Orientals.
So is it more to do with quite their striking colours, because they can have quite...
There is a huge range of colours in these. I mean, right from sort of ivory right through to a really deep, rich red burgundy. And we also get two-tone ones as well. There's a fantastic one called Giraffe that's got a red, well, it's not really red, it's more of a burgundy edge to it and then a yellow throat. So there are amazing varieties. They're more purchased really for their longevity because they do last really well, and they're a bit more robust as well.
Okay. But I can see also there's quite a difference in, say, the leaves that are under. You can see the difference between the Orientals.
So they've kind of retained more of the Asiatic lily foliage, but kind of got slightly more of the Longiflorum bloom shape. Now these are also an LA, but like our other ones, we're very stubborn about coming open. Sorry, excuse me. But again, you can see that lovely, nice, long bloom, and when they open, they'll open in that slightly curved form that these do. So that's our LA. So that's the Longiflorum Asiatic cross. And the same principles exactly as you would with the Orientals in conditioning, exactly the same principle.
So just to touch on, say, the grade, because I know we went, sorry, going back to the Orientals.
Oh, right.
So the difference between the Helvetia that you've got there, which is slightly smaller. Mm-hmm. I know you've mentioned about the bud size, but how can you identify that, say, on our website?
Okay, so on our website, it will usually tell you how many buds per stem that you're purchasing. So it will have either 2 bud, 3 bud, and then it normally goes 5+ bud. It doesn't normally go beyond 5. The blooms do sometimes come, or the stems sometimes come with more than 5 buds on, but from a classification point of view, we don't normally indicate if it's any more than 5. As a general rule, I would say stem length does have a bit of an influence on what you're buying. Quite often, if you buy a longer stem, it's been growing longer, it's naturally going to have formed a little bit better, so you're going to have slightly bigger buds, a bigger, more opulent flower. And as with all things, you kind of get what you pay for. So if you're buying a really cheaper lily and it's a short stem, this is kind of what you're going to get. You're going to get a smaller head with not very many buds. If you buy something that's a bit more expensive, like for example the Sorbonne, if I can get them out, they are a longer stem, as you can see, not massively.
I have cut them down, if I'm honest, because I did want to get them open, but
okay.
I think that one, to be fair, was a 95 centimetre, 85, 95.
Whereas this is more of your 60, 65 centimetres. So you can see, I mean, it's really difficult for everybody at home to actually see what I'm trying to get across here, because this is not open, so it's very difficult. But you're going to get a much, like with this, you're going to get a much, much larger head. You can see instantly there, you've got a completely different grade going on there.
Absolutely.
And as we always say, if you are in doubt, give us a shout.
Fantastic.
Our new catchphrase.
I love it.
So yeah, so that's our Orientals, our Luncheon Florrum and our LA. Now I am just going to touch on Calla Lilies. Now strictly speaking, all of the lilies that I've spoken about so far are a member of the Liliaceae family. Okay, now Calla Lily, sorry, we just put water on my face. Calla Lilies are not, strictly speaking, the Liliaceae family. They are Xanthodecia, but people kind of like lump them in with the rest of the lilies, so I am going to include them today. So we've got Calla Lilies here. So we've got Yelloween, which is that rather scrumptious looking one, and then we've also got Calla Crystal Blush. Now, Crystal Blush, again one of our white Calla Lilies, thank you, is one of the smaller Calla Lilies that we do, or that we supply. Perfect for wedding work, buttonhole work, that kind of thing, corsage work. But if you want something that's going to give you massive impact, something that's going to be quite a wow factor, you probably want to go for a larger lily. So for church arrangements for Easter and things like that, I would go for one of the larger Calla Lilies. Often they are called arum lilies. Strictly speaking, it's not necessarily an arum that you're buying. The two large varieties that I would usually use are Columbia de la Paix or Highwood. They tend to have a much, much larger head. You can get potentially up to sort of 15 or 16 centimetre head size. They do come quite tight. They're sort of slightly curled, so they do take a little while to develop. The bud is sort of wrapped around itself, quite interestingly actually. So do bear in mind, if you're buying those larger headed ones, then you probably need to factor that into your delivery timetable, because they do take a little bit longer to open. The smaller Calla Lilies, the smaller Xanthodecia, do actually come like this. So they come fully developed, but they do just need conditioning before you work with them. As I say, potentially you're looking at sort of 16 centimetre length or depth bloom for a Highwood or a Columbia de la Paix. So you can see instantly it's almost double the length. So you're talking a completely different animal, for want of a better word. They are worlds apart. So that's your Calla Lilies. Now, one of the nice things about Calla Lilies is you can actually bend the stem, so you can manipulate those. So they do have quite a lot going for them.
Just a question, obviously don't want to move on from the Calla Lilies too quickly. The Crystal Blush are that much smaller, but if you say get a 60 centimetre, sometimes with the meaning of the longer the stem, the larger the head size, does that relate to Calla Lilies, or will the head size still be quite
not so
the
much
same?
No, not so much. If you bought an 80 centimetre Calla Lily and a 50 centimetre Calla Lily in the Crystal Blush, you're not going to have a massive difference. What you will find is the 80 centimetre one will have quite a weak stem. So if you're using them for manipulation, go for a longer stem, then you've got more to tweak.
More to
But you're not going to have a massive difference in head size. If you had a 40 centimetre Crystal Blush and an 80 centimetre Crystal Blush, it will be quite obvious that you've got two different stem lengths. There'll be a slight difference, but it wouldn't be so obvious as it would be with roses if you bought a 40 and an 80 centimetre.
Okay, perfect. And also sometimes with the ends of the stems, when you're conditioning, it rolls up,
curly.
goes a bit curly.
They do go curly.
Is that something to be worried about? Is there ways to reduce that, or?
To be honest with you, I think it's actually quite a fun thing that's unique to, it's unique to Amaryllis and to Calla Lilies. I actually think it's quite a fun thing, because when they're curled up in the vase, actually it's quite interesting. But you can stop it. The way you can stop it is to actually bind the stem with some tape when you've cut it, and then put it into water. Then literally the stems can't
Because that also happens with Amaryllis.
Yep, Amaryllis and Calla Lilies about the end.
Is it just because of the type of stem it is?
Yeah. Well, having said that, the Amaryllis is a hollow stem, whereas the Calla Lily isn't. So yeah, they are different in that respect. But no, it's just unique to those two flowers for some weird reason. I mean, lilies in general do sort of symbolise purity and virginity. So often used to be associated with putting into church for christenings and new birth and things like that. As with Easter, God rising.
Absolutely. So keep those questions coming. We've got a few ladies actually who've joined us. We've got Julia, who sadly had to go, but she's going to catch up with us later. Right. Margaret, she says hello.
Hello, Margaret.
We've got Joan, who's asked a question I've lost it, sorry. Asked a question more so in regard to the lilies. She says it's bound to be stressful having to open lilies for, especially say for a wedding or maybe for a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if they don't open on the day that you need them to? Would you consider other flowers, or would you use them?
To be honest with you, I would normally make a judgment call. If I need something open for a Saturday and by the Wednesday it's actually not opening, I would go and try and find some elsewhere to bring more in. So we don't, in all fairness, we don't always know at what stage of development they're going to arrive to us in. Sometimes they come and they're starting to show colour, and sometimes...
So it is a good sign if they're showing colour?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Open.
So if I just illustrate that with this particular one, if I find another one that's not quite so fully developed. Here you go, this will work. So I just illustrate that. So if you look at that lily, that's looking much whiter than the other blooms. So I would describe that as showing colour. So it's actually starting to develop. It's not going to be long before that's open. If they come in and they're looking really green like this, you're looking quite a substantial amount of time to get those open.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But say it's obviously more important, say for a wedding, but for a funeral, would you still use those buds because they're obviously going to open, aren't they?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean, and obviously with funerals sometimes people do tend to use the flowers for something else afterwards. They might remove the flowers from the tribute, put them into a vase somewhere afterwards. So although you actually need the blooms open on the day to form the tribute, it's quite nice to have some buds afterwards if they are being used afterwards, because you've then got a little bit of life left in them to enjoy later on. So.
And just thinking, relating to a wedding, it will depend on the brief. So if they specify completely that they want lilies, then you definitely have to go for them. But if they weren't supposed to be so specific, maybe you could opt for a different flower. Yeah,
I mean, if all else failed and you were really struggling, I would then call the bride and say, look, this is the issue that we've got. They haven't come open. Happy to use the buds. Can we bring, I don't know, something that's going to give you impact to finish the arrangements with? But to be fair, most brides usually have something else with their lilies anyway, so either hydrangeas, roses, peonies, something like that. So you can normally get round it by perhaps bringing some more of the hydrangea in to give you the wow factor.
Definitely. And just got Judith, who says she's so sorry she missed the beginning, I think. Can you tell us how to condition a stem? Is it different? across the board, or are they quite similar?
No, they're all pretty similar.
Yeah.
So basically, what I was saying earlier is just remove all of the leaves that are going to be below the waterline, cut the stem at an angle and pop it into lukewarm water, sort of blood temperature water. Allow lots of air to circulate around the lilies and put them into a warmer domestic environment that's very well lit, so that they open up and it just encourages them to develop. If they are opening quite quickly and you want to hold them back, then put them into a slightly cooler environment. So it kind of puts them in suspended animation, basically. So, yeah. I'll just pop that one back. So, sorry, has that answered your question, Judith?
So, yes. And we've also got Michelle, who's joined us again. She's one of our regulars. So she's
Hi,
Calla
Michelle.
Lilies.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, should we mention a bit of
Shall I talk about cultivation? Yep, okay.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of changes in lily cultivation over the years. Bulbs are now usually grown in plastic troughs. They're grown in the ground, but they are then transferred. So, right, let me start from the beginning. Okay, so it's vitally important with lilies that the bulbs are planted correctly. So that's still very much done manually, as is the harvesting of them. The parts in between are now much more automated. So the bulbs, once they've been planted by hand, are actually placed into it's almost like a plastic crate. These are placed on the ground, but the development then occurs still in those crates. They're fully transportable then and can be moved around on automated belts. So it's a really high investment for growers to do that, but it does have a higher yield. It's obvious really, because you've removed all of the labour. Everything's automated, so you've literally just got the planting and the harvesting that still has to be done by hand. Everything else is fully automated. So as I say, it's a huge investment for growers, but it does produce a higher yield. So yeah.
Perfect. We've got Michelle. I would suggest to kind of watch the video back, because we did mention about the removing the pollen before, so I recommend just to re-watch that, just because we did quite a lot on that. But yeah.
One thing I didn't mention earlier actually was a lot of people who have asthma, breathing issues, problems with sinuses, and also people post-operation where they're very subject to strong fragrances. It kind of affects them, makes them quite poorly, that sort of thing. There are some lilies called a rose lily that have no pollen. So the rose lily is actually almost like a double oriental lily. It looks literally like a lily inside another, inside another, inside another. Multi-petaled, absolutely phenomenal looking flower and beautiful. They still have a fragrance, but no pollen. So for those people who have asthmatic issues, if you've got pets in the house and you don't want to bring pollen into the house, then rose lily might be something that you can look into. Relatively new kids on the block really. They're not overly readily available. They normally command a slightly higher price, but they are something quite special as well.
They're quite spectacular. Can't speak.
Easy for you to say. They are. Yeah, they are spectacular. Yeah, definitely.
Right, lovely.
Okay. So, and one perfect thing about them as well is they're available all year round. All of the lilies of some description are available at some point during the year. So, yeah, it's not something that's seasonal where you can only get them certain times of the year. So, a really good flower to use. They give huge impact, a little bit of fragrance, and they make a bouquet look a bit special as well, really.
And long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they do take quite a while to open, as we know.
Despite our planning.
So just to kind of finish off, so in terms of Easter, because I know it's coming up, so with the lily longes, when would you probably recommend to purchase before Easter? Let's just have a look at the calendar.
So Easter is the 21st. And obviously with Lent, you won't be able to put arrangements into the church until the Saturday.
So
you
would
can't
you
put
get them,
in.
say, next week, say 11th, 12th,
Yeah, I would.
to ensure?
Yeah, beginning of next week, I would.
Yeah.
And then speak to them nicely.
Sing to them if you have a nice singing voice.
Yeah, no, that would kill them off if I did that.
Yeah, I'm the same, literally. Probably kill them off straight away. Okay, perfect.
So
Well,
thank you very so much for joining us today. Obviously, if you have missed any of what I've been saying, don't forget to find us on Catch Up Later. You'll find information on our events page. Next week is Easter, Flavours of Forestry, for our table arrangement. That's going to be quite interesting next week because we're going to bring vegetables into it. By that I do mean cut vegetables, not stuff.
I wasn't even considering that.
I'm going to get shot now. I can't believe I said that. I'm really going to get shot. Okay, so don't forget to like us and share us with our friends. Don't forget to click, and don't forget also share us with your flower clubs as well. So more than happy to give tips and hints on any kind of flowers that you want to know about. Stay tuned and watch us next week. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us. Have a lovely weekend. Bye for now.